Today we are going to try something new for the channel. We are going to do our first product review focused on the new book release for Legions Imperialis, The Rise of the Dark Mechanicum. Now, for this review, instead of going through each part of the book, we're going to break it down into what I found good, what I thought was bad, what I was ambivalent about, what I found disappointing, and then just my overall thoughts. So what's good about The Rise of the Dark Mechanicum? And I think the first thing, something we've known since the book was announced, was that there's a lot of content for this book. We're getting almost basically four new army lists. We're getting the Mechanicum, Dark Mechanicum, the Castor's Households, and the Collegia Titanica. So there's tons of content. There's new missions, which I think are really good. They're flavorful. They're a different format than the usual missions. So a lot of them seem to focus more on the end of battle state of play rather than the progressive scoring that we've seen in most missions up to now, which I think is a good change, gives some variety to the objective style, and I think more variety can only be a good thing for the game. We don't want the missions to get stale, and having these more narrative-focused missions with different objective style, I think really helps with that. Going along with the new missions, we have the escalation campaign included in this book. I think this is, just from the first read-through, it looks like a great addition to the campaign set. I think it's going to be a good option for players to kind of help them build a community around this campaign, increasing the army points limit every campaign cycle, and encouraging some kind of team play with these, with the campaign manager, with the flashpoint missions, and then of course with the Grand Clash team games at the end. And that was one of my questions when I first heard about this escalation campaign, was how are they going to handle having so many players on the table at once? And I think they've done a good job. It just looks like every turn, every player on one side is going to get an activation, which seems like a simple way to handle it, and I think will work just fine while keeping the game length down. We also got a couple of interesting previews in the book, and I'll talk about those in my wrap-up at the end. For the most part, I also found that this book avoided a lot of the bad options syndrome that we've seen in some of the other books. I think most of the weapons, most of the units that are present in this book, with one or two exceptions here and there, are all viable. It doesn't seem like there's one that's, head and shoulders above the other, which I think is good on the writing team, good for making sure that's the case, because especially with something like the Lehman Rush Vanquisher, which we've talked about on the channel before, you just feel like you're missing out, basically, if you take anything else. And that doesn't seem to have happened here. There's not really anything bad in this book, and I hesitate to even put these two items down, but for the sake of completeness, I do think the formations of Legend are a little lacking. The model counts required for some of them are pretty egregious. You're going to need so many boxes of infantry and automata to field these. I just don't think they're viable. And they cost so many points that basically this is going to be your army if you take one of these. Now, they are very narrative, they're very fluffy, there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't think you're going to get much out of these. Unlike the formations of Legend in the Talern book, which I think are reasonable on the whole, and which, have some utility, these I don't think you're going to use these much. The only other thing that I noticed in the book was that the Myrmidon Destructor weapons, the rules let you take either the Volkite or the Conversion Beamer, but the instructions tell you to put one of each on the base. Perhaps the intention here is to let you choose which weapon you wish to fire. You have the option of both, but can only fire one. As I understand the rules currently, that is not the case. So you either get one or the other, which means you need to have some way of distinguishing between detachments that have a Conversion Beamer and detachments that have a Volkite. Now, you could just put two Volkites on one base and two Conversion Beamers on the other base, and that would solve the problem. They're the same pose. I'm not too happy about having to put the same pose. on the same base, but I think that's pretty much the only option. Now, I know WYSIWYG is a contentious topic for Legions Imperialis players. I won't get into that right now. For me, I like to be able to have my detachments easily distinguishable between each other, and so that is probably what I'm going to have to do for my Myrmidon Destructors. I know I'm kind of making a fuss about this, and it's really not that big of a deal, but it is important because the instructions and the rules aren't meshing here. So if you haven't put your Myrmidons together yet, it's just something you might want to consider. Moving on from the quote-unquote bad things that really aren't a huge deal to things I was ambivalent about on reading through Rise of the Dark Mechanicum. Honestly, I thought the lore or the fluff section was pretty forgettable. It was definitely not as good for me, for my taste, as what was in The Great Slaughter, which I thought had a lot of really interesting engagements, unique set pieces, just interesting moments where my expectations were kind of subverted. And here it was kind of flat for me. And I think part of that may be because the story is following a Black Library novel. And so anytime you condense down a book into 50 pages of narration, you're probably going to lose a lot of color that might have made the book engaging and interesting. And that just, for me, I didn't find it too engaging. One of the things that I brought up in my initial reaction to the preview and leak of the Mechanicum release was how GW was going to handle the durability of the Mechanicum models. And I, in fact, suggested that they might give these automata 2 wounds, and that is exactly what they seem to have done. Now, while I think this was the right decision in isolation, it leads to a strange situation where a single stand of Castellax has the same durability as a Baneblade or as one of the new Stalker models. Now, I know, of course, they have a different save, so that does take effect. But it doesn't change the fact that the Castellax, the Domitar, they have 2 wounds, and so does a Baneblade, so does a heavy tank. And maybe what is more important is that regular tanks have only a single wound. So it just seems strange to me. I do like that the mechanical models are more durable, that they have these 2 wounds. I think it gives us an idea of where GW is going to take the game when they introduce things like Custodes and Demons, but it is a bit strange to me that they have 2 wounds while tanks have only 1, while Baneblades have 2 wounds, while even some of the heavy Stalkers only have 2 wounds. And I just, I'm not sure if in the context of the whole game as it stands, that this was the right decision. I would be curious to know if somebody more experienced in big-scale heresy, Age of Darkness, has done an analysis of the durability of the mechanical models. Maybe you can let me know in the comments if 3 Castellax are actually as durable as a Leman Russ or twice as durable. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Now, this is the part of the review where it might get a little contentious. I know people have been really looking forward to Knight and Titan lists, basically since the game came out. I know that was a big point of contention, that you could not assemble a full army of Knight and Titans. And you now can, with the Rise of the Dark Mechanicum in matched play games, use full armies of Knights and Titans. And for me, personally, I am, first of all, just because it is essentially a skew list. Whether you're taking all Knights or all Titans, it's a skew list. You're focusing on one aspect of the game to the exclusion of all else. And I know you could take allies in these lists, but I'm talking about taking exclusively Knights, exclusively Titans. And I think anytime you're encouraging people to take a skew list in a game, it's not a good thing. I think there are 2 outcomes here for both players. The one is that the Knight or Titan list is going to be terrible, and the combined arms standard type of army is going to be much better, and that's going to leave the Knight or Titan player, I think, a little bitter, and perhaps justifiably so, because you have this army of god machines that has sort of been impotently taken down by men with melt bombs and tanks, and that's not a great feeling. The other alternative is that the Knight or Titan list is really good. It's too powerful. The weapons and equipment that the combined arms list can take are not going to be able to deal with the Knights and Titans very well, and they're just going to get swept off the board. And that's not going to be good for the other player either. So, I mean, maybe it's possible that there's a third solution to this dilemma, and these are both going to be evenly balanced lists, and we will be able to play a Knight and Titan list against a combined arms list with no hard feelings on either side. I just don't see that happening, because so much of a combined arms list is also focused around infantry, which are going to be able to do very little against Knights and Titans, except in close combat. And I think I just don't think that's going to make for a good game experience for either player. Now, I could be wrong. I haven't played against it yet. So I'm interested to see how it goes. I know there are a couple of people in our local group that are interested in doing it. And so I'm sure I will have my own, either positive or negative, hopefully positive, experiences to relate to you in a future time. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. I know this has been highly anticipated since the game came out, so I don't want to rain on anybody's parade here. But the last thing, and this is kind of minor, that I found a little bit strange, was that Myrmidon Secutors have the same calf as one of the new Arax Stalkers. That just strikes me as a little strange. I know Myrmidons are very good in a fight, but this is a very tall, strange Mechanicum dark thing with tentacles and saws and all kinds of crazy weapons on it. And they have the same calf. It just doesn't seem quite right to me. And I think I would be a little disappointed if my cool Mechanicum Spider Walker got taken down by a single stand of Myrmidon Secutors. So moving on now to things I found disappointing about the book. The first thing that I noticed was there's no maps, which I found very disappointing. There have been some great maps in the two previous books, and I think especially this book really could have used a map of like the Tharsis region on Mars to show us, where the different forge fanes of the different forged lords are located, where the Titan legions are positioned, where the Night House strongholds are, how they're maneuvering, and there's none of that here. I mean, there's not even a map of the Magma City, which I think would have been an amazing opportunity to show us what a big, significant forge looks like. How, the tech adept puts her own special, personality into constructing her city, her forge, where the different, events are taking place in the whole siege of the city. None of that's here. And I think that's, a missed opportunity. I think that would have increased certainly my enjoyment of the story, just being able to see the positioning of the different forces and their interaction and how they progress through the city and conduct the campaign. You could have showed a before and after of, spoiler warning, the lava dam breaking and flooding the city and destroying all of the Titans. Like, that would have been awesome. And there's none of that here. As far as the rules go, I think it was really disappointing to me to see that there wasn't any kind of cyber theurgy. That's something I was really looking forward to with the Mechanicum, some kind of activated ability that you'd have to use to augment the powers of your force. And I don't think this would have been difficult. I mean, from off the top of my head, I remember in Big Heresy, in Age of Darkness, there's a cyber theurgy power where you can force a infantry unit to disembark from a building or a transport. I mean, that seems tailor-made for Legions Imperialis. And yet, there's none of that here. And I think that's a missed opportunity. I think that would have been an amazing way to inject some variety into the Mechanicum list, into the game, and I'm very sad that we don't have any of that, because I think it would have been an easy thing to do. I don't think it would have been hard to balance, and they just haven't done it. Now, it's possible that they're saving that for a future expansion. We know that there's going to be more stuff coming out for the Mechanicum, probably another book, and perhaps they'll have stuff like that in there. But for right now, unfortunately, we don't have anything like that at all. And another missed opportunity to add some flavor and charm to this book is the fact that there's no Legio or Night House special rules. And as it stands, I think that the Titans and the Knights are a little bland. They're basically just big things with guns. And there's none of that sense of majesty and power, at least in the games that I've played so far. And they just don't have much personality. And I think allowing some special rules for each of the Legios, for each of the different maniples even. I don't think there's any special rules for the individual maniples, which have their own special names. And I don't think it would have been hard to do this either, because you could just draw from Adeptus Titanicus. And it seems like, you have an order system in Adeptus Titanicus. It seems like it would be easy to do. I looked up the Legio that I'm intending to play, Legio Ossidax, and one of their Princeps abilities is to move at the beginning of the game. So you could have just given a Legio Ossidax maniple in Legions Imperialis forward deployment, and there you go. There's some flavor that really would have made your Legio, your maniple of Titans, feel special and unique. And they just haven't done that. So it's possible they're going to add that in a new expansion later on down the road. If they don't, I'll be really disappointed, and I'll probably try to do, my own set of special rules, because I think that would be an easy thing to do for GW, and I think it would really benefit the game. The last thing that I was sort of disappointed to see was that the Stalkers just seem kind of fine. A lot of their weapons seem to be light or light AT. They don't seem to be particularly dangerous. They don't seem to have much durability. I know they can merge their construct shields, so that will help. And they have some powerful weapons when they get up close. But the Archer Stalker has a pretty short-ranged gun, and it's the only one that I can remember that is not light or light AT. I think the Cerberus Heavy Stalker has a decent gun as well. But overall, I was kind of underwhelmed by them, especially for these things that are supposed to be, these highly coveted artificial intelligence, constructs from the vaults of Moravec, and they just kind of seem not that great. That may change once I get a chance to play against them or play with them. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'd be curious to hear your impressions about how these Stalkers will perform on the table. With all that said, though, I don't want you to go away with the impression that I'm not happy with the book. I think it's a solid addition to the line. We've had some good previews, I think. The Skitari, Secutari, and the Ordinatus are all mentioned in the fluff section of the book. So that means, at least for me, that we're for sure getting an Ordinatus model. There's 3 different types, 2 of which are mentioned. I think it's the Actaeus and the Sagittar are mentioned in the fluff. The Ulator, I don't believe is, but I'm sure that will be an option when the kit comes out. Whether or not we'll get Skitari or Secutari, it seems likely to me, just because, they're mentioned in the fluff. They're part of the Mechanicum. GW hasn't seemed to be too interested in releasing new infantry models, so those may come later, but I would be surprised if we don't see them at all. I did like the fact that the book focused on the Mechanicum. There's basically nothing for Space Marines or Solar Auxilia here. They have a few mentions in places, but really it's all Mechanicum all the time in this book, which I know was a big complaint for Age of Darkness players when they got the Martian Civil War book, because there was a lot of stuff in that book that had nothing to do with Mechanicum, and that also had a lot of missed opportunities. So good on the Legions Imperialis team for keeping it focused on the Mechanicum here. There's also some great new missions. The new armies, I think, are great. It's more variety to the game. It's getting more people excited, more people interested in the game. I know I had my reservations about the Knights and Titan focused lists, but at the end of the day, if people are enjoying themselves and having fun and are excited about playing those Knight and Titan lists, I think that's what matters. And so if that gets more people into the game, it's all a good thing to me. As I said, I think the book is let down in a few areas, but those few areas they're not that big of a deal. And if you're interested in Legions Imperialis, I think this is a no-brainer. You should go get it, especially, obviously, if you're interested in Mechanicum. If you're just an Astartes or Solar Auxilia player, this probably won't do much for you. But if you're kind of just all in on Legions Imperialis all the time, you probably already own this book anyway. But if you had reservations, I think it's worth a buy. So that's it for this review. I hope you enjoyed it. It's kind of a new thing for the channel, so let me know how you liked the format. Let me know if you want me to do more reviews. I can do a review of the Battle Group box. And I'll see you in the next video.